the podcast. I am so excited for you to meet Kristen Doverspike. She's out of Finalsite and she has so many great ideas, great insights into social media, not only for businesses, but for schools. So we are going to talk a ton about trending things, some companies that you might want to watch for some ideas. And she's got an amazing school. Okay. Amazing school we're going to talk about. We're going to link in the show notes. You're going to want to check it out to look at the ways they're using social media to entertain and to inform and to really engage. We're going to talk about TikTok and whether that is something that your school should jump into. We're also going to talk a little bit about student storytelling. Kristen has a lot of experience and she's going to share it today. I think you're going to be inspired and you're going to learn something. Talk about learning something. I love to learn from you. Each year we do an annual survey, a school PR survey, and it is open now. Okay. It's open until December 22nd. So if you're listening to that after that, then you're not going to be able to participate. It'll take you about 10 minutes to complete. The best is I'm going to come back and I'm going to do a podcast episode on what we found out from the survey. I'm going to do a blog article. We're going to share the results. But what's really fun is just finding out what is working for schools, what they're focusing on, what they need help with. It just really helps drive a lot of the content that we end up creating here at Social School for EDU to help in your social media storytelling efforts. So if you would participate in the survey, there is a link in the show notes. And if your answers can be anonymous, but if you want to be thrown in for a $50 Amazon gift card, you can include your email. That's not really associated with your responses. We just want the responses so that we know what people are working on and we can give that data back to all of you. But you have a chance to win if you complete the survey. So that's due by this Friday, December 22nd, 2023. The results will be out in early 2024, so we can't wait. But now let's jump into this week's K-12 PR tip. All right, today's K-12 PR tip is all about what you should post when your school is on break. Likely you have a winter break coming up. You might have a spring break. You might even have a fall break. Of course, we've all hopefully got a summer break. But some of you are wondering, what should I post on social media over break? I just published last week a blog article that's helpful that you can take a look at over on my website. But first of all, it's okay to take a break. It's okay not to post over the break. You need a break. Your fans probably need a break. They're going to be busy with family and doing different things. So it is okay. Now you can schedule things out and just remember, if you do, you've got to monitor those and you deserve a break too. So there's a balance there. So just so you know, it is okay to take a break. Now for us at Social School for EDU, we manage social media for nearly 90 school districts, and we have a lot of weekly features that we do. Throwback Thursdays, a staff feature, a student feature, maybe even an alumni feature. And we keep those up over break. And they usually drive some good engagement and we can get them scheduled ahead of time. So if you want to take a look at that, you could certainly keep doing those things. In the blog, we've got a really nice example of a business partnership as well with some of the students. And then the other thing that you can post is recent classroom activities. So a lot of times leading up to a break, there's a lot of things happening, especially in the month of December. So don't be afraid if you've got a lot of content to work with, save some of that, schedule it out over the break. And you can use things like last week, our students, and just knowing that it's not exactly timely and that they're in school right now, but it was last week. So you could definitely do that. All right. Just trying to help you out. If you're wondering, oh my gosh, what do I post? It's okay not to post. You can do your features and you can definitely do some overflow content from before the break. So hope that tip helps. Now let's get into a bunch of tips, bunch of great conversation with today's guest, Kristen Doverspike. I am so excited to welcome Kristen Doverspike to the podcast. Hi, Kristen.
Hi, Andrea.
I feel like
Thanks for
I'm
having me.
turning the tables a little bit with you because I've helped out on some Finalsite stuff. But you have a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge. And so I wanted to get you here on the podcast. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. You're right. I think this is the first time we've flipped the script here together, so I'm excited.
Yeah, although I have learned a lot from you. So why don't you just
Likewise.
introduce yourself, share your background, your role as director of marketing and operations there at Finalsite.
Yeah. So I'm Kristen Doverspike. Got my start in content strategy out of college. Worked at an agency where I really got into the whole world of marketing and including social media. Worked with clients big and small across the world. Worked with a few schools at the time, and so worked on SEO, website content, but then also social media, advertising, things like that. I got introduced to Finalsite a few years later. I came on as their inbound marketing manager. So primarily at the time I was working on Finalsite's social media strategy, creating educational content for schools, working on email, and slowly, over time took over email, advertising, things like that. And now my role is director of marketing and operations, or director of marketing operations, really manage our demand generation.
Okay.
So that includes everything from content to social media to email and advertising. So really creating Finalsite as this thought leader, getting schools to know more about us, but then also learn from us because we genuinely like to help schools. So that's my primary role now. And I really love everything we do here and being able to help. My team does do social media for us now, but I still have a good time, directing it and seeing where we're going.
That's great. So how long have you been part of Finalsite?
Almost exactly 4 years. I think it'll be
Okay.
4 years in a week or so.
Okay. Awesome. Happy
Yeah.
birthday or
Yeah.
whatever. Happy anniversary. I don't know
Thank you.
what you call it. Can you tell us a little bit more about what Finalsite does and then explain a few of the big ways that you really help, provide training and support to schools that's totally free because I've gotten to learn from quite a few of those events.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a business, Finalsite is a full suite communications platform. So your website can be hosted through our CMS. If you're an independent international school, you can manage all of your enrollment through our enrollment management system. Then from communications, your email, mass communications can go through the system. Really a full suite platform to help schools connect with their communities. And really what we are built on in most of our employee base are from folks who worked at schools themselves. So I think that that's where the really nice genuine piece of Finalsite comes into play with our education content and things like that, being able to not only equip you with the right tools, but then set you up for success long term. So Finalsite offers a lot of free learning opportunities, professional development. We have free courses, content offers. We have about 4 to 5 blogs per week that come out on today's latest in terms of anything that's related to your marketing communication strategies. And that's what we really love to do. We have a couple of events every year just to get everyone together and to learn from each other in a nice kind of safe environment amongst your peers.
Yeah. And I love it because you invite a lot of, I mean, there's people at Finalsite that lead those trainings, but there's people from schools that lead those trainings. And
Yeah.
so how has social media fit into your role? You said you don't do the social media necessarily day to day now, you more manage that. But can you just tell me a little bit about that? And then we're going to dig in to your thoughts about school social media. So don't worry, everybody. We're going to definitely dig in because Kristen has a lot of experience with helping schools in that realm. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was interesting coming in at Finalsite when I did. Social media was still kind of exactly what it sounds. It was social. It was a little bit of the Wild West. Didn't really know how to be a business on social media. And I did manage it fully then. So at the time, we were still kind of figuring out our brand, our voice. It was a lot of experimenting with social media back then. And as Finalsite got bigger, as we started learning what schools really needed, being able to be that kind of thought leader on social media, our presence really transformed. And then I was lucky enough to help build our demand generation team and have, really great dedicated folks on our team to content and social media. And it's evolved a lot over time. And I think just if you're listening as a school, your social media presence has evolved over time. It was, very photo based, then it was very graphics based. And even just in the last year, it's transformed incredibly. And we're still learning what works for us. And I think we'll probably get into that today on what works on social media these days. But our presence has transformed. It's been very cool. LinkedIn has been huge just as a business for us. Like 15,000 followers or so compared to Facebook, which feels like it's, decreasing a little bit in engagement, and kind of learning over time where our audience is and adapting to that.
Yeah. And I think because you serve schools, many educators feel a little bit safer on LinkedIn versus, Facebook. And so that really does make sense. So you've been heavily involved in helping school clients kind of with some of their social media strategy. So as you look, at schools you've worked with and schools you've reviewed, what do you see as the most important things for a school to keep in mind with their social media presence?
It's a great question because I think it's evolved so much even just recently. I think, like I had mentioned, social media used to feel very social. So that was typically the go-to, when talking with a school, it's like social media is social first. So ask questions to garner comments and things like that. But even just in recent months, it's kind of like social media is becoming more entertainment media than social media. So it's more about what can you create that almost gets the non-vanity metrics. So what can you create to get the views and the shares and things like that? I think what schools can do to really just keep up with it is to be on social media yourself, which is tough. Even myself, I feel like I go dark on social media because it's so overwhelming and, content overload. But just keeping an eye on what's trending, what other, not even schools, but other companies are doing. Social media has become very kind of imitation of each other. I think it's rare to be an original content creator these days. It's very much, and I think we can thank TikTok for that. It is very much kind of imitation media and seeing what you like and thinking, okay, that might work for us. Maybe something that's a little more fun and candid, taking video content, maybe putting our students at the forefront because they know social media better than anyone. And understanding that it is kind of that thinking like a media company, building your audience first. I think it's very tough when you're being asked, I'm assuming many of you who are listening to this wear many hats, maybe not just social media.
Yes.
So say, someone from the admissions office is asking, okay, we need to up, registrations for our open house. We need to put that on social media. It may not get the engagement you're looking for, especially if your audience isn't really built up yet. It's definitely a double-edged sword of getting the information you need out there with the information that will get the engagement so that you kind of get the algorithm to show your content more often. And I'm definitely getting into the weeds here, Andrea.
No, I think it's good. I think the registering for the open house. So, obviously you can use social media to, simply get information out, but it's probably not going to get the reach. When you think about schools using it as a marketing tactic, what are some of the best strategies that you've seen? I mean, obviously you're saying we got to build up the algorithm. You've got to give them engaging content to begin with, but are there some other things that you can do to maybe spice up that, hey, it's time to register, or we've got this big fundraiser coming up and we want you to be a part of it? Would there be any ideas that you have there?
Yeah, I think it's definitely creating a mix of that content. You don't want to be silly all the time. You don't want to be serious all the time. It's so tough, I think, to be a content creator these days on social media, especially as a school. It's kind of having a strategy, but also not taking yourself too seriously so that your content performs. But I think in terms of that important content that you need to get out there, think about how you can, first of all, pepper in maybe a slightly entertaining aspect. Is there any way to add a video to this? Is there something that you can do if you have maybe someone on your team give a virtual tour of campus through video, have a student take over, and matching those engaging pieces with the important information so that you get that initial view. It's so tough to stop the scrolling. So maybe just a graphic with dates won't really do it for you, but an engaging video may. And then the information within it is what really gets you. And I'd say too, just from a strategy standpoint, this doesn't necessarily get you to reel people in, but in terms of keeping track of what you're doing to understand what maybe works, adding UTMs, or I think that it's urchin tracking module, but a UTM basically is a little code you can add to the URL of your links so that maybe if you are consistently posting admissions messages, you can go to something like a utmbuilder.net, and all you do is add some keyword terms to your link so that when you check the analytics, you can see specifically how that open house maybe campaign is doing, because you can keep all of those clicks together. It's a little tougher to track in the back end of social media without it, but doing that can help you say, okay, this isn't working. Maybe we need to try something new. And I think that's the best way to move forward on social media is, keeping track of those analytics.
Yeah. And you've mentioned students a few times, and that's been my biggest key, I guess, my recommendation to schools this school year in the year 2023, finally getting past a little bit of a lot of the caution and things that we had to watch out for with COVID. And it seems to be getting a little bit more back to normal. And so, as far as really pushing that engagement, pushing the reach, tapping into what our students, they're already on TikTok and things like that. So I think that is really key. Have you seen any schools doing a great job with that? And do you know how they're trying to incorporate students into the storytelling?
Yeah, I know actually, Andrea, I think you joined me on a discussion recently with a group of marketing communications leaders in schools. And part of that discussion I thought was really interesting was getting students who are maybe interested in making a career out of this. Now, this really only works for those that are in the more high school years. But if you're at a school with older students and maybe you have a media club or a class, that they're interested in content creation, getting them involved, they're going to be the ones who are most passionate about it. And I loved that tip because then you're not pulling, you're not maybe trusting a student who isn't actually great on camera once they get there. Trusting those students who know that this is something they want to do because they have a little bit more incentive. They want to create their own portfolios, going into college and getting internships and things like that. So I think that's an excellent tip. Just making use of that. In terms of great examples, I know I've been a big fangirl of McCallie School for years. They do a great job on social media, getting their students involved. It's almost, I'm jealous when I look at what they're posting because they do, I will be honest, even better than Finalsite does on social media as a school because they get their students involved and they're so talented. Just from the video work, the ideas, they're all very engaging. I think they've kind of cracked the code, I think, in terms of short form content that gets your eye, but then also gives you some information about the school. They use it as a recruiting tool, as far as I understand. And it's such a impressive use, I think, of social media today.
So, what school is that again?
McCallie School, McCallie.
Okay, we're gonna give a link to that in the show notes, because I love being able to take a look at schools that are doing it really well. And I really think it helps because then you can showcase or show some of that to the students and say, this is kind of what we're talking about, and then they can take it from there. So, so that's awesome.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? Of course, I lost my train of thought because I get so excited when I find out. Rob Johnson, who I met on that call with you. This is why everybody, you hang out with really smart people. Okay. Kristen emailed and said, hey, do you want to come hang out? And they've got this group together and we're going to talk about social media. It's just going to kind of be talking about whatever. Well, I met actually 2 different podcast guests that have just been on, Kristen, from that call. And Rob was one of them. And so he has an amazing program. So go back a few episodes, you guys, from this episode, you'll listen to Rob. And then I met another gal that had some great stories. So anyways, I love that.
We learn the best from each other for sure. I learn something new from the schools we speak with all the time, what works for them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I am so I'm excited to tell you, Kristen, I'm starting a social media internship program with my
Oh,
little school district.
oh, that's
So I
awesome.
know I've been doing this now 10 years. Okay. And we know we need to get the schools involved, but I've always been so focused on building my business, right? I'm a entrepreneur here and just small but mighty little team. But I'm like, I need to do this because I'm gonna get great content because I manage the social media for that school. And I'm gonna learn so much about this process of bringing kids and involving them
Yeah.
that it's going to make me a better teacher and a better student from learning from them and learning from other schools that are doing this. So I'm super excited. It is
That's
a
awesome.
yeah, and I don't know if you know Ryan Ferran out of Arcadia School District in California,
Might. Yeah.
but he's been doing this program for like 8 years, and I just had him on a training in my membership group, and then I'm like, okay, I'm getting rid of the excuses. I'm just going to do it. I don't have it all figured out. I know what I'm
Fine.
going to talk about at the first meeting, and that's it. But that's okay because
Yeah.
it's got to evolve. So stay tuned, everybody, for learning more about
That's
that. But
awesome.
yeah, I'm excited. All right, now let's get into a little bit of data and measurement. There it's important, but it can be overwhelming for what you're looking
Absolutely.
at. So what are some metrics that you think schools should look at when it comes to social media?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just recently reading Hootsuite came out with their 2024 social media trends to, look at.
Okay.
And one piece went into this. And I thought it was really interesting because I think the metrics that have mattered to us, over the last few years are certainly not the metrics to keep an eye on these days. And we even see it here at Finalsite. And I'm not sure if any schools listening might run into the same trouble where the likes, the comments, those vanity metrics, you're seeing less and less of it. It is not necessarily meaning that your content's not performing. I think that the way that so many of us, younger generations especially, interact on social media looks different than it used to. They're less likely to hit like, but more likely to share it to a friend in their DMs. Social media is now becoming, and this is what the 2024 trends that Hootsuite put out kind of got into, is that more users on social media are taking to kind of a silent form of engagement. They're using the close friends feature on Instagram to put out a private story to just the people they want to reach. They're utilizing their DMs more, so they're sharing content, they're watching videos, but they're maybe not liking and commenting. And some platforms are even taking that and the rise of this more kind of private social sharing to put it at the forefront. So platforms like TikTok, Instagram that didn't previously show how many shares something had are now showing that, or at least slowly starting to roll that out. So I would take, that's kind of my long form way of saying, I think going into the new year, I would take a look at those kind of behind the scenes metrics. How many views are you getting? How many clicks are you getting? And I know I had mentioned UTMs earlier. Really good to take a look at that, even if that's all you put your focus on for your social media kind of data tracking, is putting those unique links in your posts so that you can head into your analytics and see what's performing a little more clearly than what, the native analytics and social media may show you. I recommend that. Taking a look at the shares and maybe even prioritizing it so that you say share with a friend, or we're less likely to get those comments that we used to rely on even just a year ago. So taking a look at those behind the scenes metrics, I think, will really play a key role in how you identify your KPIs in the new year.
Okay. So you mentioned UTMs a couple times. Does Finalsite have a blog about UTMs at all?
We do. Yes, I can share that with you,
Okay,
Andrea,
so
so
we're
we can
gonna have
include it.
that in the. If you didn't, I was gonna say, Kristen, I think one of your 5 blogs next week needs to be on UTM.
Yes,
So we're gonna link that article. I kind of
absolutely.
asked it because I was pretty sure you had it. So
Absolutely. I
that's
think I wrote it actually. So it'll be anything that I would recommend here, I believe, is in that blog. So I'll make sure that you have it, Andrea.
okay, perfect. Now, you mentioned a couple times TikTok. And so we've got TikTok, we've got Instagram Reels, we have Facebook
Yeah.
Reels, and many schools are scratching their heads and they're like, do we need to have a TikTok channel? And I've shared some of my thoughts. What are your thoughts in regards to that short form, kind of vertical video content Do schools have to be on TikTok? What would you say to that?
I think it's still a bit of a question mark, which is so tough. I think, and depending on the school, I can understand that maybe TikTok is not the place for you. If you have younger students and you're not as comfortable doing that much video content and you can't really keep up with it, then I'd say no. Because if you can't keep up with it, or if you don't even feel right in doing that to be able to think of the content that would be appropriate for your school, then I'd say no, because then it won't really serve you in general. And all it will do is add an extra thing to your plate that I'm sure is already overflown. So I would say if you are maybe a school that is, older student focused, like I had mentioned McCallie earlier, I know that they're great on TikTok. There are a few others that do have older students who can almost help manage that TikTok, help create that content. Then I'd say yes. TikTok is really taking off. It's becoming its own search engine. Younger generations are using social media as their search engine, and TikTok has good a good system in terms of prioritizing keywords. So if maybe someone is searching for schools and they're on TikTok, they might come across your content, which is a really great recruiting tool for you if you have the resources. I'd say if you don't have the resources, which is completely understandable, I don't know that TikTok is a necessity, but I would say that that short form video content is still really huge. So if you have an Instagram or even a YouTube, if you wanted to get into YouTube shorts, creating that more vertical video content is what more and more of us are craving. We're more likely to stop when we're scrolling and that vertical video takes the entirety of our screen. And I think it's good to play around with, even if you don't have the resources to try maybe one or two, take content that you already know exists, cut it and kind of resize it. There are great systems like Canva, which I'm sure many of you listening are good at, that can help you reformat it just for that format. I think playing around with that is huge because it's what we kind of crave these days.
And I know that they've just announced some more editing features right in like Instagram Reels, that makes it easier to kind of focus in on certain spots. I mean, if you had
Yeah.
a more of a horizontal picture, you can scale it in different ways. So it's a tool and it's very effective. I don't know how many times. I mean, my daughters are 16 and 18. So how many times they'll be like telling me about something. It's like, how do you know that? How'd you learn that? On TikTok.
Yeah.
So as much
Yeah.
as much as it might be sometimes a time waster, there are ways to add value. And so looking at how to do that, I think is great. You mentioned earlier, a school to follow. And then you said watching companies is helpful too. I think watching higher ed can be helpful to see
Absolutely.
how
Yeah.
colleges are using it. But are there any accounts for company wise that you like to keep track of, or is it just kind of wide open for?
It definitely varies. I think that every once in a while, a company will come across where I'm like, oh my gosh, to work at your company and social media must be so fun. I think Duolingo has a really fun social media presence, even if just for inspiration. It's definitely, even here at Finalsite, we can't emulate the types of things that a company like that, their language learning app, can put out. But even just to get inspired, to laugh, to say, okay, oh, this is some trending audio that maybe we can adapt and use for ourselves. I really like Duolingo. Some just more professional development areas that I like to follow. I love HubSpot. They do a great job of putting out educational but entertaining content. So it's pretty helpful in our roles here at Finalsite to see how we can do the same for schools, but then also how schools can kind of adapt their important information with entertaining information. Later, Lateer. They're a social media scheduling platform. If you don't have one, Later is a great one, but they also have a really good presence because that's kind of what they do. So it's kind of fun to get inspiration there. But yeah, I think just even scrolling, seeing what's trending, it sounds almost ridiculous, but even here at Finalsite, we found that doing one meme a week is what gets us the most engagement. Hopping on a trend that's fun but appropriate, it kind of stays within that line of staying on brand for us, but then also hopping on something that we know people will recognize because it's trending, is doing the best for us. And that's what takes the least thought. I think that sometimes that beautifully created graphic with a lot of thought behind it can flop. And then that little meme that you took 5 minutes to create is what does really well. And I think that's almost the nature of social media these days, is to take a risk and have a little fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think for schools, I mean, consistency in storytelling is often an issue and sometimes wanting the perfect picture and all of
Mhm.
that. But it's like sometimes it's the story, it's getting it out there. You'll be surprised something you spend a lot of time on might not do very well, and then something that you don't think is a big deal does well. And so we just need to be consistent and not afraid to try some things. As far as some of the best stories that you've been able to see schools share, do you have any that stand out for you in regards to, gosh, that was just really a neat way of sharing that, whatever it was?
I can't think of one off the top of my head, the specific school. I know every year Finalsite does Finalsite University, which is our user conference in person. And last year I held a social media workshop. And one school, and I feel terrible that I can't remember their name, but they did it was a fundraising effort where they really intricately planned out about 2 weeks of content. So it was like every day we're posting something different about this fundraising effort, but we're going to make it unique every day. So it was kind of like, we're going to do a video Monday featuring a student. They're going to be showing kind of the benefit of this fundraiser and so on. Next day, it will be a more simple graphic. Third day, it will be kind of hopping on a trend. And it was so well done just in terms of the strategy. And I think it did a great job of telling that story, kind of keeping within their brand, promoting something that may be tough to promote otherwise, in terms of fundraising, that kind of stuff that can get a little dry after a while, and keeping it interesting and really putting the community first is kind of what I loved the most about that campaign. It wasn't do this because, it was more, let's get together and make a difference sort of messaging, and really doing something well over a long period of time. I love that. And again, I feel terrible that I can't remember the school, but I think having something like that is a very important thing that you want your school to get out, taking the time just to plan it out, and then getting your students involved, recording some content that then you can cut up over a few days, which is what they did when they did this. They videotaped a few things, cut it up into short form video, scattered it over a week. And it did so well for them. And I think that that's sometimes the toughest thing, is dedicating the time. But once you do, it can really pay off. So it's not overdoing it, but it's putting the thought into it, I think, which is what makes a difference.
Well, yeah, and the listeners, I'm sure they're thinking about those 2 or 3 things that happen kind of every year that
Right.
probably deserve that type of attention. And if you're able to find that example, you can let us know. We'll throw
Yes,
it in the show
absolutely.
notes. But no pressure either, because I, like you, am looking at stuff all the time, and then you're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't remember." So that's a great example. So as we wrap up, you've talked about so much, and I think I know what you're going to say, but if you were to give our listeners one, you like your best social media tip, what would you say it would be?
Yes, and I think I've definitely brought it up a few times. I think keep it simple. Don't be afraid to have fun. I think one of the best pieces of advice I professionally, heard over the last 6 years or so is to think more like a media company, entertain, build your audience first, and then move forward. So keep yourself educated, see what the latest trends are. The algorithms change constantly. So I think that the best thing you can do is keep it simple. Don't be afraid to be a little candid, and no matter what, that will do better than the dry static post. But then once you build that audience, those more important pieces of information will naturally get the engagement you're looking for, because your audience is then there. You kind of have to establish that, and then let the rest, follow. So don't take yourself too seriously.
Yeah,
Keep it simple. Get inspiration from others, like you're doing here, which I think is best. If you're listening to this, you're already on the right track in terms
right.
of staying educated, and yeah, have a little fun.
Yeah, I love it. Well, you can check out Finalsite social media. We've got those linked in the show notes. You can tell that they have a lot of fun, and definitely will link over to your website, because you've got a lot of really helpful information, including the UTM article that we'll link,
Yes.
and a lot of other blog articles. Keep up the great work, Kristen. We'll keep following the things that you guys are doing, and I'm excited to see Finalsite's growth, and just trying to help more schools. I think you guys are doing some great work with schools all around the world. So it's exciting. So thanks for spending some time with us today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Andrea. And likewise, so excited to see what you have coming out.
Yeah. What's the best way to stay connected to you, Kristen?
Yeah, absolutely. You can always connect with me on LinkedIn. My name's just Kristen Doverspike. You'll find me, or you can reach me at Kristen.Doverspike, which will include the spelling in the description of this podcast at finalsite.com. If you want to shoot me an email, I'm accessible both ways.
Okay, we'll get both of those linked there. And thank you guys. Everybody have an amazing holiday, Christmas, whatever you are celebrating. We want to wish you the best because 'tis the season. We're going to go into 2024 and maybe be able to tackle a few of these ideas that Kristen gave to us today. So thanks so much, and we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.